Welcome to World Series News, the news program that the New Daily calls conspiracy theory. Conspiracy because what we do is we go straight to the source of the data and interpret it in ways that the mainstream refuses to pay attention to. Because if they did, they'd find out that what we're being told is absolute nonsense. And from there, you'd be able to work out exactly what we need to do and why we need to vote in a brand new government on May 21 to get to the bottom of this mess and to stop what's been going on for the last 2 years. In order to prove that to my audience today, I'm going to go back to the well and I'm going to compare Australian COVID statistics with Nigeria. And we're going to pick up from December 18th, 2021, and we're going to look at a month-by-month breakdown of those statistics all the way up to April 18, 2022. And when you see it, you'll realise that the big audit that's going to come after we get elected on May 21 will rip this joint apart once and for all, and we'll be able to realise that what we're being told is an absolute nonsense. So how about we get started? On the screen now, I'm going to do a COVID statistics comparison. And we're going to compare, as I said earlier, Australia and Nigeria. Australia has a population of 26 million people. It has a GDP per capita of US $53,000, and it has a double vaccination rate at December 18 of 95%. Nigeria, on the other hand, has a population of 215 million people, a US GDP per capita of just $3,500, and a double vaccination rate of 4%. So it stands to reason that Nigeria is a much larger country, 8 times more populous than Australia. It is 17 times less wealthy than Australia, and its vaccination rate is 24 times less than Australia. So when we compare the starting point of December 18 with Nigeria at 4% double vaccinated December 18 versus Australia 95% double vaccinated at December 18. The cases in Australia of COVID at that point were 235,562 in Australia, 224,831 in Nigeria. So they're round about the same number. In 1 month, in that period after Omicron had unleashed across the world, and as you remember, it did actually come from South Africa, so was on the continent of Africa where Nigeria is, but much further north, but it also managed to get to Australia in that period. And as you can see by the statistics in front of you on the screen, Australia jumped massively with a 1.579 million case increase in just 31 days. Nigeria, on the other hand, had its biggest jump as well, but jumping only 26,347 cases in that period. Now, in February, Australia continued through January and into February with a further increase of 1.166 million cases in that month, and Nigeria had an increase of just 3,043 cases. From February to March, Australia jumped another 823,927 cases. Nigeria just 882 cases. And from March 18 up until just before today, April 18, the increase in Australia almost doubled yet again, up to 1.602 million cases of COVID in Australia. At the same time, in Nigeria, in the same Omicron variation and BA2 and all the other ones, had just 567 recorded cases. Now, before we go on to look at the deaths, it's very important now to address another elephant in the room, and that would be those that choose to dissent or to reject these numbers that are put together by worldometers. And they might say that Nigeria is not very good at collecting data. However, the World Health Organization also collects important data, and it has shown that Nigeria is the most populous nation on earth for malaria cases, and in actual fact accounts for 31.9% of all malaria cases in the world, of all countries. And there were some 240 million cases of malaria last year, meaning that in Nigeria, there would have been almost 80 million cases of malaria in that country last year alone. And out of that, some 250,000 deaths, of which 80% are in children below the age of 5. That should give you some idea of just what is happening in Nigeria and how the numbers are certainly counted and people are taking anti-malarial drugs there. It also needs to be noted that they don't use neither ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine in those treatments, but use other anti-malarial treatments. So let's get on with the deaths now. And in Australia, as at December 18, when we start this observation, Australia had had 2,252 deaths. Nigeria, at the same time, had had 2,984. And if you compare that to the original case numbers, it shows that Australia's survival rate was somewhere over 99%, and Nigeria's was somewhere under 99%, somewhere around the 98% mark. So very, very close still. Now, jump ahead to January 18, a full month after that huge burst of cases, and Australia's death rate increased 667 deaths from December 18 to January 18. In the same period, Nigeria, with far fewer cases, had far fewer deaths at 132 cases by comparison to Australia. In the period January 18 to February 18, the deaths in Australia jumped massively, the worst number on record, 2,178. Almost more deaths between January 18 and February 18 than in the entire period when COVID began some 19 months ago, all the way up to December 18. In the same period, Australia had 2,178 deaths. In Nigeria, they had just 26 deaths. In the period February 18 to March 18, Australia had 908 deaths out of 823,000 cases. Nigeria had zero deaths from COVID from 882 cases, whilst Australia had 823,927 cases, resulting in 908 deaths. And from the period March 18 to April 18, Australia had 781 deaths from 1.6 million cases, and Nigeria had just one death from 567 cases. The important note here, right at the bottom of the page, is to see that the overall survival rate in Australia for the period December 18 to April 18 was 99.9%, and the rate in Nigeria from December 18 to April 18 was 99.6%. That means in Nigeria, 249 out of every 250 people who get COVID survive, and in Australia, 999 out of every 1,000 people who get COVID survive. However, you can see there that in the last 4 months, whilst being very heavily vaccinated at 95% and using Omicron and Omicron BA2 as the two main variants, you can see that Australians were extremely susceptible to this contagious virus. However, over in Nigeria, surprisingly, the people were not catching Omicron or BA2 anywhere near the rate in that country, despite being unvaccinated 96% of the time. So, what are we actually seeing now that is making a very, very different view of what's going on? Now, if you bring this data up in the real world, that is the world of Australian media, that is for people who are watching here, or the rest of the Western world, you'll be told that the powers that be are only looking at Western countries. John Skerritt has said it for the TGA, and they often repeat that around the place in the CDC and other organizations. So it should actually be the World Health Organization that gets to the bottom of this. But strangely, they're not. So this is where we really have to draw a line in the statistical understanding of what's actually going on. How is it that Nigeria can be almost immune to this virus and be 4% double vaccinated only? What's going on here, and why don't the powers that be, the scientists, where the science is what we're all meant to follow, is showing us a very different discrepancy? Please share this video far and wide as you realize that what we're going to do when we win power is that we are going to have a massive royal commission into exactly why and how this one-size-fits-all solution fits no one at all. This is Jason Olborn reporting for World Series News, and I'll see you on the next show. Thanks for watching.
3, 2, 1.